where are you beaming in from?
Chicago, Illinois.
How are things in Chicago?
You know, they're pretty chill over here. It's grocery stores are fine, streets are empty. You know, everyone's pretty much listening to the quarantine order. So, but there's no real panic in the air. You know, I see a lot of good stuff. I see people looking after their elderly and, you know, becoming a little bit tighter in the community and stuff like that in my immediate block. So I don't know. I see, you know, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to like downplay what's going on, but media again, which is pretty nice to see.
So how's the coronavirus affected your work? Are you able to get anything done or what?
Oh yeah, absolutely. My shop's pretty isolated, as most knife makers and people in this industry are. So luckily, I've been able to keep at work. You know, it hasn't really been affected too much. I like to joke that most knife makers already. So.
Okay.
Yeah. How about I heard the East Coast where you're at is getting hit pretty hard.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm in North Carolina, so we're dealing with it. We've been under a stay-at-home order officially, I think, for just a little while, but most of us kind of took heed early on in the process. So we've been working from home. Our business, tobacco business, has been working from home for like 2 weeks now, in addition to the governor's orders. So it looks like we'll be working from home for all of April. So it's a little bit of an adjustment, but you know, we're still getting stuff done and we're able to do a few cool things like this. So we're all taking advantage of the opportunity and the time. So it's kind of, you know, we're making the best of the situation basically.
Yeah, that's another thing. I see a lot of people getting really bring out their ingenuity as far as stuff they can do and you know, businesses and ways to bring in income and keep busy. I see online a lot, you know, people are starting to rediscover their hustle, you know.
It definitely, I think that's what's good about it, because it's like we're all doing what we probably should have done months ago or years ago in some cases, and saying like, like how can I stay connected and still get stuff done? You know, how can I stay productive? Oh, let me learn how to do this. Because before all of this, like I've seen people do Instagram lives, but I had personally never done it. I was like, I don't think I have time for it. I don't know how it would apply to me. But now, of course, I've learned how to adapt, and I think a lot of people are the same way. It's like I was speaking to Matt Booth a couple of last week, and he was saying, you know, this is kind of cool. He's like, I could easily squeeze in more events if I did things like this. If I'm physically one place, and yet I did an hour video here or there. He's like, you know, I could be in two places without having to physically be there, and probably still get the same amount of work done and get that same kind of traction going for the business. So
yeah, no, I listened to that entire hour-long podcast you did with him. That was a great one, you know.
Yeah. So what I thought with you, I know you and I have been communicating through emails a lot, and you know, I've been working on the story about the Condor cutter that you all make and all that kind of stuff. And yet, you know, when I was kind of coming up with, you know, people to interview and thinking who would be interesting to interview, I mean, just your story, the short description that's on your website alone kind of piques your interest, because I think you have a completely different background than a lot of people that I would know just from the cigar industry. You know, I can't see most people being that, you know, getting into the martial arts or MMA and all that stuff like you might have dabbled in, or, you know, working security for people. So I thought it would be fun just to kind of hear some of your stories of you know, your background and lead into, you know, where you are now.
I, you know, used to build motorcycles from the ground up before that as strictly a hobby. And it was really, I realized how rewarding that was when you finish. I mean, some of these projects would take years to finish, 4 or 5 years, but like the feeling you get afterwards when you finish a big project like that was always just super rewarding. I mean, you you feel like you're riding a cloud, and I was kind of thinking to myself, well, I want that all the time, and at the time, the motorcycle industry was really in the tanks. There's a lot of companies going under, so I didn't really necessarily want to go in that industry. But as a kid, I've always enjoyed cutlery. I've always enjoyed the process of making cutlery. I messed around with it in college earlier, just to kill time. So I started down that path kind of randomly, And yeah, so once I started that way, I kind of just dove head first. I quit both my jobs and dedicated, 24/7 to that job, which I don't, if you're looking to pick up a craft as a profession, I don't recommend going the route I did. It was very impulsive, which is basically the story of my life. I just dove head first in, no savings, no nothing. I was like, I'm going to be a knife maker starting right now, dove head first in, and it worked out for the best because of sheer luck. But for anyone out there who's looking to get into crafts as a profession, I would take it slow. Start learning the basics first, start as a hobby, and then gradually make a plan.
So, I mean, just with that, like you were saying, you have a passion for this though. So that's kind of what drives you to kind of leave what you knew, the comforts of it, to kind of get into like what you did now. So I would think, how was that transition for you? How was that journey, that entrepreneurship? Because I know that you said it was difficult, but obviously you stuck with it. So there's something about it that you liked enough to kind of keep doing what you were doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's really an obsession, and anyone who does their job to the best of their ability is usually just absolutely obsessed. It's like a mix between diligence and obsession. I am lucky where my obsession drove me to be more disciplined with my craft because I just loved what I was doing so much, and still to this day, and that obsession eventually evolves into other things, like my obsession was at first just knife making and only knife making, but because I had to become more disciplined to be a better knife maker, that started leaking into other aspects of my life. And I think that's really where the big reward of doing a craft comes from, a passion is kind of like the spark that starts it all, and kind of evolves it into an obsession. Because like when I go home, I think about, manufacturing and different methods, of what I do all day long. I don't leave my work at the workplace. It follows me home, So when you're thinking of that, when it's on your mind like that, that's when you're in the right place.
What inspires some of the knife work that you do? Because I mean, I don't know anything about knife working and all that kind of stuff, so I'm kind of curious about these different areas of people's businesses that I might not be familiar with. So like, what's it like to basically to dedicate your life to making knives, and how do you stay interested in it? Like, how do you find new stuff to kind of push you forward in this kind of profession?
It comes from everywhere, it comes from martial arts, movies, all sorts. And I keep myself interested because I a lot of times I just don't do knives. Like the cutter was a long time obsession of mine because I've been smoking, cigars since I was a teen, and never really liked the cutters that were available, or maybe not necessarily liked, but I thought they could be done better, So you keep it fresh by broadening your horizons, So I've been doing tactical type knives for so long, for me, like 7 years for me, that like the Condor cutter project was a real welcoming, change up for me, because it required totally different mechanics and stuff like that. So I think what it comes down to is challenging yourself, Don't get stagnant. Don't keep doing the same thing over and over again. Get out there, try to, it's all, I'm obsessed with making, not just making knives. I'm obsessed with making anything, I'm obsessed with tools and how they're made, automobiles, engine components, everything from the simple to the, to NASA type aerospace grade stuff. All of that interests me. So trying not to narrow your field too much really will help you keep inspired into other things. And that could actually lead over to other, like the Condor cutters gave me ideas for knife work, So, those types of categories always transition over if you're looking for it,
And what's your creative process like? Because you said you always have ideas or inspirations. Do you track them in your phone? Do you write them down? Do you sketch out ideas? I'm just, because I come from like a graphic design background. So, I went to the before graphic design, back in the 90s when I was in high school and all that kind of stuff, we were, doing the, they would say, sketch out your ideas. Like always have a sketchbook with you. That was the thing. Always sketch out because you might, have inspiration. You're supposed to sketch it down in the sketchbook and then look back at it. And I still have some of those sketchbooks, and I look through them sometimes and going, that's a interesting twist. I don't know what I was thinking back, back then, but it's
Oh yeah.
Now in my 30s.
Which one was I on when I was drawing that?
Yeah, and then in my 30s now, I think about some of the writing and creative stuff that I was doing back then. And I'm going like, wow, that was like little seeds of what was to come. But I had no intention to do writing and journalism. You asked me that back in the day. I was just like, I would have just shrugged and said, I don't know what I'm doing. So how do you what's your creative process like?
Well, I definitely start sketching. I'm learning more with AutoCAD and computer design, but I will always start with the sketch. And so when I start sketching something, if I recognize it from anything else that I know of, I typically just scratch that sketching. I'll put it aside. Like if I start realizing, those particular lines are from this knife, or because with the mainstream, like wide explosion of social media, like Instagram and stuff like that, it is really easy to subconsciously remember a cool product that you saw and take inspiration from that, and you have to be really careful that you're not copying. It's okay to be inspired by something, but where's kind of the line on blatant plagiarism, which as a creative, that's the ultimate taboo. So it's because we're so heavily exposed to it, it's hard to kind of empty your mind of those design aspects to keep something original. So a lot of times when I'm starting to sketch something, there will be 9 or 10 iterations I just kind of toss out the window. And sometimes you have to take a break. Knowing when to walk away is probably one of the most important things. And once I've realized, okay, that's the problem, and put it aside, I could get over that hump and really start to design something unique, but always, so that's how it starts, but always sketch and always write stuff down. I don't use my phone as like a memo pad. I physically write something down. There's something about the process of like physically writing down notes, physically writing down ideas, that kind of gets the wheels turning in your brain.
Yeah, and I think there's a study a long time ago. This may have been, again, back when I was in high school, but it said if you actually take notes, like by hand, and write it out, then you have a much better ability to regurgitate that information than if you just heard it or recorded it or, put it in your phone. So there's definitely something to that process.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, even when I'm designing stuff on the computer, there's so many little processes you have to do to get every single line right. I sometimes lose my train of thought while I'm doing it on the computer. But if I actually just sketch out my ideas, the flow, the connected flow is just better. It moves better, and I'm able to put my ideas down. And then once those ideas are physically in front of me, I can make the small improvements on the computer. It's like every tool has its place.
Now, with you being in a creative field, are you the type who, because when you create a piece and you sell it, do you want people to know that you created that piece, or is it something else that you get from it? Is it like the pleasure that they might get from using that that's enough for you. Like, what's your feelings on that? Because I know there are some people who are like, I want credit for my work, basically. I want people to know I created this product. And then there's others like, it's more about the enjoyment.
I'm definitely more of the latter. Like I like functional art. And I like to see it being used. Like every time I'm in my local cigar lounge and I see somebody using our cutter, that gives me more. I don't have to go out and say, that's mine. Like I just like seeing it in action. When I make a chef's nut and the chef is, making beautiful food for other people, that brings me a lot of enjoyment. Even something as simple as a blue collar carpenter telling me, hey, I used your knife today to cut 50 sheets of carpet, and it kept an edge. That's definitely more rewarding than anything else, and I get pleasure from the art knives I make too that are mostly, they're not really meant to be used. I mean, they can be used, they're built to be used, but they're very elaborate. And most people buy them as collector knives. And that's the more, I guess, ego build, where I'm very proud of the actual work I've done and, the credit's there because it's a more visually impressive piece, so you dabble in both.
Now, to make this transition into where you are now, like how did you get into cigars?
Oh, like I said, I've been smoking since a teenager. I smoked my first cigar before I ever smoked my first cigarette, as like a 14-year-old kid. So I think it probably I know it came from watching Arnold Schwarzenegger, like in like every movie he was smoking a cigar, a lot of us viewed Arnold as like the, pinnacle of masculinity, So I grew up watching the late 80s, early 90s action films. And he was, all the action stars would be smoking a cigar afterwards. So I took that inspiration and kind of just ran with it.
Do you remember the what your first cigar was?
Yeah, it was, when I was like 14, I managed to buy a pack of Macanudos, cigarellos. And the military school I went to, I snuck off in the forest and lit them up and did not realize how far the smell of cigars go, and immediately got busted and immediately got put in life detention.
What's your go-to cigar now?
I really like Matt Booth's Room 101 series. Particularly his Ichibans are my daily go-tos. And I recently tried his Doomsayer, which was a phenomenal cigar. I absolutely love them. I fully intend on getting more of those. And the Undercrowns are a big one that I go to for daily smokes.
Do you like?
I like Drew Estate's story.
Yeah, Drew. We have a good. Our magazine and all of us on the team have a good relationship with JD and all the Drew Estate people. But it's always fun to kind of hear how what people gravitate towards. So obviously you're you mentioned Macanudo, but you also seem to be willing to try some of the newer wave, I would say, stuff. So not just the traditional stuff. You're not the type who would say like, oh, I only smoke Cubans, or only Padrones, only the Fuente stuff. So you kind of like some of the up and coming companies.
Oh yeah, I like, just like everything. It's like you can't say like I only like Italian food, I only like Mexican food. Like if you're super picky with that, then you're missing out on so much. I like to try everything.
Yeah,
I'll go online.
Yeah.
It's just, again, why limit yourself? There's so much better. There's so much great things to come out. So I'm definitely not a traditionalist when it comes to that.
So now I guess we can talk about your cigar cutter. So the Condor. This is it. You were nice enough to send me one, and like I said, I've been trying it out. I tried it out the other day, really, because I was, I think the picture I just posted a couple of days ago with the Drew Estate Cuba Arte, it was a torpedo, and I was like, cutters are really weird because you never think about like it's that artist thing, like when you're designing something that's meant to be used, like how do you design it so that it's very useful. So I like this one because it's easy to handle, it's easy to use. You can't, you can only go out so far. I read the instruction manual, so it's built to basically fit, a cigar in here, so you won't go too deep. Because that's always another thing too. You see people who basically snip off like they call themselves just enough to smoke it, but it's like the whole head of the cigar is like gone, and you're like, you didn't have to cut off that much. But this one I like because it kind of stops you from doing that. So you kind of get like, I don't know if perfect is the word for it, but you get a pretty good cut with this cutter compared to the other ones where you just like snap, and it comes out crooked and it's like weird, and sometimes you nip your fingers and it's just like, So just talk about how you came up with Condor and all this dual feature, I guess you could call it.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the hardest things I've ever designed. Like I said, anything that is designed for a specific function is always like one of the hardest things to do. I probably went through 7 different prototypes before and different designs before I finally came up with the Condor cutter design. It wasn't easy, I wanted to take all the best aspects of knife making, which is like the best steel you could possibly find, for the time, the best materials, the action, all that stuff. It has to be crisp. There can't be any slop. So all the design elements I usually do on a custom knife, I was trying to do in the cutter, and have it look cool and be functional. Like there's so many different checklists I had to do for the Condor cutter. So it went through a lot of different variations. At first it started off, it first started off looking like a bean, and so like, I'm eventually going to do a video on like the evolution of the design of the cutter and show all the different drawings, the different, Rex prototypes and stuff like that, and the failure prototypes, so people can kind of see the difficulty it takes to design something like this, totally from scratch. Because again, I could have taken different design elements from stuff that's already out there and just kind of copied what was out there. But then we would just be another brand, putting out the same type of cutter. So I want the hardest part was getting it to be unique.
Yeah, and I don't think people realize, like, when it comes with cutters and like how you cut your cigar, while it's a preference, it's like you actually get a different experience based on how you cut. So, and you probably know this, I mean, your straight cut is going to give you more flavor because it opens up the cigar. You don't have anything, it's not like a funneling effect. V cut, which I like a V cut, but you're not getting the full flavor. So you're getting everything's funneled through the little spot, and you're getting like this teeny tiny little bit of flavor. So I mean, did you think about that kind of stuff when you were designing this, or did you just say, straight cut is going to be the easiest thing to kind of design for?
Oh yeah, I was banging my head against the wall trying to figure out which way I was going to go, because originally I started as a V cut guy, and again, it's all personal preference.
Right.
So I knew going into this, I wasn't going to make everybody happy, and I've had plenty of requests to try to make the cutter into a V cutter, but the way it's designed, it just won't work right now, and it's something I'll eventually take to the drawing board, because it's just another idea and another challenge, which I'm always willing to accept. So yeah, there's so many different factors of thinking about it, and I eventually switched to a straight cut, and the design lent itself to be a straight cut design, so I went with that route. The geometry of it made sense as well. I'm big into chisel grinds, which typically give you like the sharpest blade. Like if you look at the best sushi knives in the world, where the cut really matters. I mean, if you're cutting a piece of fish that's like several $100s, you need to make sure you don't fray the edges. It's an art to how these sushi chefs cut the fish. So if you look at the sushi knives, they're all single-sided blades, which is the chisel ground. So I definitely wanted to use that design element in the cigar cutter, because it's similar type material. So really the design came from the function and what it was actually cutting.
So that kind of brings me to the next question of how, for us basic consumers who aren't knife makers and haven't had the background that you have, like when we're out there buying a knife, or even just buying a knife, just looking for a knife, what do we need to be looking for? Like, is there something that we need to be like, if we see a certain thing that we like, we need to stay away from that, it's not a good quality? Like, what makes a good knife?
It's pretty much it comes down to steel, like materials used for the handle and the blade, and fit and finish, and budget. I mean, budget's probably the most important thing. Just like anything you buy, you need to research it. You need to, learn about the company and what they do. So if you're making a relatively small investment, say under $100, you will know what's the best bang for your buck for $100. And on a side note, manufacturing is getting so good that $100 buys you a lot more knife than it did, say, even 7 years ago. You could get some stellar knives that are sub $100. So knowing that those lines have kind of changed, you got to stay up to date. There's a lot of videos that a company like Blade HQ puts out and they're really, really trustworthy guys. Also one of our dealers. They're really trustworthy guys, and they put out videos every day of like the best $50 knives, and they'll explain and break down why it's a great deal for $50. They use good steel. The manufacturing is good, and they use good handle materials, and the fit and finish is good. Is it going to be as good as a $250 knife? No, but if you want that, then you buy the $250 knife.
And is there something that we all should be doing to better take care of our knives and things like this, our nice cigar cutter, once we get it, to kind of keep it high quality before it, I think the biggest problem with knives is for some people that, after a while they grow dull, so they're not as effective.
Yeah, I mean, basically it comes down to cleaning. Just keep your shit clean, knives, cutters, everything, just with the Condor cutter, just as long as you keep it clean, and when you buy something that's higher end, it should also be built for maintenance, like a good knife or a good cutter will be easy to maintain, and one of the aspects when I was designing the Condor cutter is I wanted the end user to be able to maintain that product without having to send it back to us every month, for say like resharpening or something like that. So when we started with materials, I wanted materials that lasted long, that kept its edge for a very long time, but also be easily able to maintain. You could take apart the Condor cutter with one tool, and that's I believe a T7 torque that you could take apart the entire thing. You could strop the blade with either a piece of leather or cardboard and have a very maintainable edge, a good functional edge. It's not going to be razor sharp like it comes from the factory, but it'll be very, very usable.
So outside of knives and cigars, like what are your interests? Like what gets Ed going?
Well, motorcycles for sure. MMA, I love the resurgence of the UFC and what, modern MMA is doing right now. It's very entertaining. I think it's reaching a new pinnacle point. But other than that, it's motorcycles, MMA, dude stuff.
Dude stuff, yeah. So like that's because when I was coming up with like the little promo blurb for Facebook last night, I was like, we're going to talk about lots of manly stuff. And I was thinking, I'm probably the last person who should probably talk about that, because I sit around listening to country music and pop music and watch daytime TV shows and stuff like that. So I'm like, Ed's going to be like, what in the world? So
no, country music can be very, very manly. Yeah.
It depends on who. There's some.
Yeah, that's true.
It's funny because like you listen to some songs and they can get like really, like if you really listen to the lyrics of it, some of them can get really like gangster. You're like, wow, I didn't know. There was somebody, it's either Loretta Lynn or Dolly Parton. They have this whole song where it's like a story song, and it's like how they took, how this person took this woman down to the river and was like, this big romantic thing and was gonna propose to her, and she was like, no, I don't want to marry you. So and she's like, but please don't kill me, and he killed her anyway. And you're just like,
oh yeah,
you're like, God,
I think I heard about that song.
right? And it's just like, you're thinking like, wow, this is like a Dolly Parton or a Loretta Lynn song. And you're like, you don't think of them, but so there's some different, depending on who's singing the songs, there can be some definitely kind of deep, manly, interesting angles to some of these female songs.
Oh yeah, no, I listen to TED Talks a lot, and one of the TED Talks is like the world according to Dolly Parton. It's like a 5-part series, and they were talking about that song, and the lyrics that they're talking about, you could literally put into like a Slayer song.
Yeah.
If you just like up the if you just changed up the lyric, or if you just changed up the tune, it would go perfectly into a Slayer song.
Right. Part of your bio on the Red Horse website that I was interested in, it said you did private security for people.
Yeah.
At one point in your career, what was that like?
It was a lot less exciting than it sounds. I mean, it was fun. It was fun. Sorry about that. I got a call for a second. Yeah, it was interesting. I did a lot of private bodyguarding for like high profile clients. That was always fun. But yeah, it was mostly logistics, organization. There nothing like it is in the movies. Most clients were very low level threat. It was usually like the celebrities who you're thinking to yourself, you're like, you don't need a bodyguard. Like nobody cares. You don't need a bodyguard.
You weren't in a Kevin Costner, Whitney Houston type situation.
Yeah, exactly. That's like the ideal. But it's like dude, not one person recognizes you. You got a hat on. You're fine. Yeah, it was always funny because, and I probably sound like a broken record, but like it was always, you could tell who was a low level threat by the type of bodyguard they wanted. The celebrities and the wannabe big shots always wanted like the biggest, hugest guy, that you could find, like the stereotypical bodyguard, 6'6", 300-pound dude. That's who they wanted. A lot of times those guys are like the least trained and least competent. They're just big, and then you could tell who's an actual like high level threat person, because they just said, they wanted kind of the gray man, the dude who you would never tell if you would never even know they were in the same room with you. But those guys were always, the most well trained, and those are the guys you could tell who were high level threat type clients.
Somebody had a quick question. They said, how many cigars can the Condor cut before sharpening?
Well, we don't actually have a full test as far as how many cuts, because I don't have that many cigars. But I mean, when the original prototype that I had probably has gone through at least 1,500 cuts and is on the original sharpening, on the original OEM edge without cutting. I mean, the steel we use is meant for like heavy duty utility knife use. It's M390 steel, which if you do a short Google, you can tell that this is one of the toughest steels for the knife industry. Now, as long as you use the Condor cutter just to cut cigars and cigars only, it's going to last a very long time.
And if anybody else has questions, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll try to answer them in the time we have left. Because getting back to your security kind of background, when I read that, I kind of laughed because I remember going to Vegas one time, and it wasn't a security guard, but it was a driver that I was working with for this one trip. And, the first thing I think about with celebrities, of course, is that they say, sign an NDA, don't talk about what goes on here. And this driver, I don't know if he had that kind of agreement, but he was just like, he talked about, I won't even say who it was, but he talked about this one person, a celebrity, and he just like spilled, not all her business, but he was just like, oh yeah, I drove this celebrity around for like a whole week in Vegas, and this is how she treated her family, this is how she treated me, and you know, it was just like, I was like, wow. It was just like sitting back there like, thank goodness I'm not like a TMZ person, because I would have had like 10 stories just from that one, a short ride. So I'm always curious people who work with or have to deal with celebrities, or people who think they're celebrities, I guess you should say, like how that experience is. Just is it as funny or amusing sometimes as you might think it is? Is it like you're just like rolling your eyes sometimes, like, well, oh my gosh, like when is this gig gonna be over?
Well, they definitely say like you should never meet your heroes, and that's 100% true. You know, like I used to work a lot for country singers. You know, for whatever reason, my boss would always put me on with the country singers, or with the country stars. And you know, in college, I actually used to work on a pig farm. I went to Eastern Illinois University, which is, they call it EIEIU. You're literally on the college campus in the middle of a farm. So the best jobs we could get were on the pig farm. And so when I would bodyguard a lot of these country singers, I would talk like, hey, you know, like I used to work on a farm, and try to talk shop with them on farms. And most of them were like, hey, dude, I grew up in Memphis. You know, I grew up in the middle of the city. Or you know, like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, most of these dudes has never even stepped foot on a farm or anything country related, you know. So that was kind of a bummer. You know, you realize like, oh yeah, they're you know, it's just a job for them, you know. But yeah, and you never realize like how stereotypical the coked up star, you know, the coked up movie star or whatever it really is. I mean, most of that, all stereotypes apparently come from some sort of truth, because they, you know, they're definitely not bullshitting on that one.
We have another question that just came in. So, with the success of the P-line knife, is there any plan to do something similar with the Condor?
The Condor is actually technically part of our production line. I knew originally we were going to make it like a mid-tech, like a small batch type deal. It was going to be very expensive, but the demand, I can luckily say, was through the roof. The response was better than anything I've ever had, because the cigar industry is much larger than the knife industry. A lot more people smoke cigars than are into like collector knives. So we added, you know, that actually started the P line, because I knew I had to do something different with this line to meet the demand. And that started everything else. So yeah, the P line is really, the production line is really where we're starting to refocus on everything. We've got a set of culinary knives coming out that will be as every high standard as a custom culinary knife is, at a production price.
Is there anybody in the cigar industry that you hope to meet one day that you haven't yet met?
I would say either Rocky Patel or and I can never remember his name. He's the owner of Gurkha Cigars.
Oh, Kazan.
He actually, yeah, that's him. He actually purchased a Hellraiser custom from me many years ago. Like 6 years ago, he when we first started out, he ordered a Hellraiser from us, and he was actually the one to tell me, hey, you should make a cutter. But he's like, I love the knife. He's like, would love it if you did a cutter. And that kind of started the whole chain of events here.
Yeah,
and I'd like to run into Matt again. You know, I haven't seen him in ages.
Anytime Matt Booth is like one of those people. Anytime he's there, it's sure to be a good time.
Yeah. And between you and Matt, you guys are hustlers. I you know, when before this whole craziness came down, I saw you two just running the gauntlet as far as traveling goes.
Yeah, it's been interesting not being able to travel, because March for me was going to be busy. So I was looking forward to the trips. It's not that I wasn't looking forward to the trips, but I'm one of those people who I enjoy when I get there get to wherever I'm going. I'm like, good. The whole point of getting ready to leave, to getting packed, to getting on planes, to getting where you're going, to get from the airport to that part of traveling is not my favorite. So
yeah, I can. So is this like a welcome break for you, not having to travel, or are you starting to get stir crazy now?
No, I mean it's a nice break because the last couple months for me personally, I've been very busy. So it was no sign of it stopping. And that's kind of the feeling I'm getting from a lot of people in the industry. It's like whether you're in the media side or you're a brand owner, traveling is just part of it. But this, like the digital part of it, like us sitting here kind of having a conversation has not been a part of our industry. But now in the last few weeks, it's become a big part of the industry too. So everybody's like, I don't have to go, spend money on a plane ticket and the hotel rooms and the food. I can just sit from the comforts of wherever I'm at and get just as much done. Because like like with Matt Booth, for example, like if you go to an event where he's at, I mean, there's like a line of people sitting there waiting to talk to him. So you get a good 5 or 10 minutes from him, which it should be, so he can focus on everybody who's there. Yet with this, you get a good hour or however long your different platforms are. You get a good amount of time, and it's just you two kind of talking with people kind of chiming in. So it's I think the coronavirus is definitely not a great thing, but it's also forced us to adapt, which I think as an industry we kind of need it. So hopefully for you too, it's a time for you to talk about Condor and get it into more people's hands, because definitely with cigar cutters, and I've heard this a lot in the last couple of days, like how is the coronavirus going? And it's been a big talk about cigar cutters, especially because in the stores when you're sitting there, you buy a cigar and they say, do you want, you either get two types of people. You get the people who are just like, who don't think about it and don't ask, and they're like, oh, would you like me to cut your cigar for you? Which would be a great time for them to like pull out something like this and go, want me to cut your cigar for you? And it's a conversation starter. Or you get those people who are just like, hey, you got a cutter that I can use, and they like, take the cigar and they put it in their mouth and then they want to cut. Right. Yeah. And now I don't think with coronavirus that's going to happen anymore, which is a good thing for everybody. So it's like, buy your own cutter, but have a nice statement piece. And that's what I like about this. It's a statement piece. It's not just a plastic, $5 cutter that you would buy, up at the cash register just because you forgot a cutter at home. This is something that you would, keep in a nice little bag that you gave, and it came with, it has your logo on it, and you would take care of it.
We have leather sheets coming up too.
See that too, yeah. And you would take care of it, and you would be sure to this is something that you would not forget about. So it's not like you would get home and go, oh darn, I forgot to get my cutter back. You would sit there and watch somebody use it, and then you would say, give me back my cutter, and you would, take care of it because it's an investment, but it's a nice investment that's going to last. So I think hopefully, like I said, this coronavirus kind of brings companies like yours and products like the Condor to light, because I think going forward, we're going to need a little bit more attention to having your own your own tools, your own stuff, so you can stick with your own germs and don't have to worry about spreading it to other people and all this other stuff.
Yeah, I think that's one of the benefits that may actually come out of this whole disaster is personal preparedness. I think a lot more people are going to be concerned about that, and that will lead into other stuff, like the Condor cutter. But yeah, I think people are way more conscientious of that now, which they needed to be, because that safety bubble is paper thin, and while we all enjoy it, and don't get me wrong, I want it to continue, and I hope we all get over this and learn a lesson. You should always have that personal preparedness mindset going from here on out.
Yeah. So like, how do you plan to market and get Condor's name and usage out there for people? Do you have any plans right now, or is it just kind of organic? What's going on with that?
No, we definitely had plans. We were going to hit all the major trade shows, and I was dumbfounded by how many trade shows and events there were in the cigar industry. When we started planning everything out, I'm like, there's pretty much something every month, and I was kind of mentally bracing myself for getting on that travel schedule. That I was like, oh, this is why, Antoine's always on the road. This is why Matt is never in one place, at any given time. I was like, because there's a lot. This is a travel heavy business, and I had no clue. I had no clue it was so travel heavy, but we were gearing up to do so. We're going to hit up all the tobacco shows in Vegas, and all the major events. We started booking travel arrangements, and then
Yeah.
all of that kind of got put up in the air, and we don't know where it's at. But hopefully it doesn't go too far along, because I was actually really getting excited to hit these trade shows. That is where we're going to start. But again, it's kind of one of those things where you have to adapt to the situation. So we're going to be doing a lot more podcasting to get the brand awareness out there. I'm going to bring on other craftsmen from different trades. Just like you're bringing me on as a knife maker in the cigar industry, I plan on just doing podcasts with many different artisans, including cigar makers and cigar rollers and, bike builders and just all sorts of different people who are just obsessed with their craft. So a lot of social media push, because that's one of the safest things you can do right now. Everyone's at home,
exactly.
they're on their computer.
and just the playback too, because like with these, you might not get a lot of people watching just as it happens, but you can easily pull the video and repost it on Facebook or Twitter or wherever, or YouTube, and have a playback. And that's what I'm sitting here thinking. I'm like, how can I, extend the life of these conversations? So I'm looking into pulling the audio out and just making it an audio version for people, and having like a little special series like the Quarantine Diaries, where it's like the last, couple of days worth, and hopefully I can keep this going throughout April because we have a stay-at-home order until like the end of April. So, I'm going to be here for a bit. So I hope to like make it through a lot of people in the industry and have these different conversations, but make it also accessible to people to, pull up whenever they want to after this is all over and have those conversations. But hopefully you'll get a chance to get out there on the road. It's just like once you start traveling, that's it. It's a slippery slope. So just prepare yourself.
Yeah. I was mentally bracing myself to do that because I'm not a huge fan of traveling, but I love meeting new people, and I love getting out there in the industry. And so far, the tobacco industry has been really, has kind of been arms open, welcoming for us so far. So I hope that trend continues. I'm definitely excited about getting into it. But I'm also really excited about the online stuff as well. I see a lot of great podcasts coming out, and I see them in more repetition, because it's finally fulfilling a need. And I think that's going to be somewhat permanent even after all this is blown over.
Yeah, definitely. Like it's definitely changed my, because I've watched people do this for a year or two, especially on Instagram, but I had never had any real desire to do it until, when you're stuck at home and you're like, what else should I do today? It gives you something to work towards.
I think this is going to be a good outlet for a lot of new cigar smokers too, because I personally witnessed a lot of new cigar smokers coming about, and they have to learn about this stuff, and learn how deep the industry goes. So I'd love to see more videos on how cigars are made and explaining the different type of wrappers and fillers and construction and how to properly cut a cigar and the etiquette and stuff like that. And I think this big social media push that a lot of companies are doing, hopefully expose a lot of new smokers to that, and it kind of widens the industry.
Definitely. We have a few minutes left, so just to kind of fill the time, I think you should reach out to Kazad again if you haven't spoken to him in a while, because this is definitely something that he will be interested in. Somebody who sells luxury humidors that are, not just $100, but like $1,000 or so dollars. I can easily see him gravitating towards something like this. So I would definitely, if I were you, during this quarantine stay-at-home period, see if you could reach out to him or whatever.
Yeah, he had actually originally wanted me to design a cutter that was based off of the Hellraiser knife. So this is the Hellraiser. So he had purchased one from us, and he wanted to basically make that into a cigar cutter or add a cigar cutter to it. And that's actually what kind of I tried to in many different variations, and they all kind of failed. And that's actually kind of what started the grounds for the Condor cutter, just because I was trying to fulfill that need. But yeah, he's actually the one that put me on that path. But yeah, I should reach out to him. There's so many different. Again, I didn't realize how extensive this industry was.
Yeah.
It's so big. It reaches so many different people, and it just like the knife industry, it has its own subculture to it. So I'm just kind of like started to get into that subculture and realize it.
Yeah, and we, like I said, I mentioned this at the beginning, but we've been working on a story. So we have a story about the Condor coming out in the next issue of Tobacco Business Magazine. So it's I've been overseeing the design of the story. I had a few tweaks, but I think you're going to be happy with how that comes out. So hopefully, that's going to get a digital push as well. So that will hopefully put you in the minds of a lot of the retailers and manufacturers in the industry as well. Just kind of tell your story and, show this up close and personal. Basically, you open up the book and it's like, bam, like it's like, I think it's pretty impressive. So it's always fun to do a different type of story outside of just cigars and show the accessories and stuff. So I think the story that's coming out in the May-June issue will definitely be a good one for you. So hopefully you'll get some business out of it. So I'll be curious to hear any feedback you hear once that issue does come out.
Yeah, we're just basically trying to take the educational approach. I think that's what your piece is really going to help on, is because a lot of people see the cutter, they see the price tag, and they can't. There's that filler in between. There's that gap in between that they're not quite getting. They're like, okay, it's almost a $300 cutter. Why? Like they just the sticker shock hits them first. But education is the best counter tool for that. Where you let them know manufacturing processes and materials used and why everything is just better. Why it's going to last longer, and educating is always the hardest part. Because there's I don't necessarily know if people are willing to initially take that dive into researching all of this, So when you can put it in a nice, tight little package like your magazine or like, a YouTube series kind of, giving the gist of all this complicated material into like a 5-minute snippet, or better yet, like a 2.5-minute snippet, but have to be very educational, I think is probably the best sales tool,
Yeah, and just going off of that before we end, maybe that's a nice idea to do with the Condors, to have take your education that you were talking about, like how to cut a cigar, how to light a cigar, and work the Condor into the video, and you can maybe be that resource for people, because people are constantly on YouTube and just online in general looking for that information. So if you turn yourself into that education and slip the Condor in there so that they see it every time they open up one of those videos, learn how to get into the craft, then hopefully in their mind they're going to be like, well, the first place I'm going to go is to Red Horse to get this product, because I see it in all these videos. So that must be the standard to go to. It's just an idea. That's how
No, absolutely. We're already working on it. Again, with all this time we have for the quarantine, we're going to be doing a YouTube series on, exactly things like that, educational videos, how to cut a cigar properly. There's just a wealth of information that could be had from that stuff, and an endless amount of content, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. But yeah, I'm really excited. I'm actually kind of not glad that this all happened, but glad that there's opportunity that it's creating.
Right, exactly. Just to give people something to end on, where can they go to find out more about the Condor Cutter and about everything else that you do?
The best place to go is obviously our website. It's redhorseknifeworks.com. You can go to our Instagram page, Red Horse Knives. I update there, as often as I can. Our YouTube channel, which is Red Horse Knife Works. Those are probably the 3 best outlets.
Well, we're just at our time mark, so I want to thank you for taking an hour out of your time to speak to me today. It was fun. Definitely learned more about knives today than I probably have ever thought I would learn, period. So I know I learned something, but that's what these little talks are for. So definitely enjoyed speaking to you, and I hope that we get to meet at one of these trade shows, whichever one makes it through the coronavirus shutdowns and disruptions. So hopefully maybe PCA, we'll see what happens with that in July, but hopefully I'll see you on the road somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually got to get one of these in your pocket. You've done so much for us, so I got to have you repping our product. So.
I will. I use little knives like that all the time around the apartment. So I think I've gotten both of them from Kazard. So
Right. That's funny.
well, thank you again, and look forward to our next encounter.
No problem, bud. Take care and be safe out there.
You